A new lab book. Now, creating a lab book, you need to be mindful of the name and also mindful in what configuration you're in. Because if you try and create a configuration, a lab book from a different configuration, it will not run in this configuration. It'll just go, no. So I'm going to create a new lab book, and I'm going to create, so today. Now, one thing that you have to be mindful of is, you can do it completely from scratch, or you can create it from an existing lab book. And this is what I mean. It's like, is that lab book from this configuration? Because if it's not from this configuration, it will not work in this configuration. So if I try to use an existing lab book that used the trace and the RSH, and I try to run it in this configuration, it wouldn't work.
Let me think.
So remember when you made the sequence
Yes.
in ICDAT,
Mhm.
you had to make the sequence and the methods in the configuration you were using.
Yeah.
If you tried to use it from another configuration, it would say no.
Right.
Yeah.
Like every morning, we're doing this check, all the
Mhm.
flows, everything. Then we save current configuration.
Yeah.
Then we run the sequence.
Yeah.
Then use the that day configuration.
But if you try to pull a sequence from previous and it was designed for a different configuration, it would just go nope.
Mm-hmm. But now we have a new configuration set,
Yeah.
right? So we create our completely new lab book.
Yeah, right. You're creating a lab, right? So the difference between the sequence and the lab book is the sequence you can run it and run it and run it and
Right.
repeat it.
Yes.
With the lab book, you can't.
Lab book is associated with that configuration.
It's associated with that a particular configuration
Mhm.
and also a specific sample list.
Okay.
So you can't rerun a lab book. You'd have to copy. So you'd have to create a new lab book from an existing lab book. So you'd have to name it something different. So for example, if you, in this case, I've got CO2 on-offs.
Mm-hmm.
That's all that's in it. But I want to do, that sample list is complete, and I want to create a new lab book. I will use the old template to create it, but I have to name it as something different.
And if you name it as a different lab book, and you can use current day configuration.
Oh, okay, okay. It will always use the most current tune settings.
Oh, okay.
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 But when I'm talking about configuration, I'm talking about, is it just the conflow? Is it the trace GC
Mhm.
with the RSH on the conflow, or is it the gas bench? So you can't change between those configurations. So it's the instrument configuration. The lab book is specific to one configuration. So when you create a lab book in this configuration, you can only use it in this configuration. You cannot use it in a gas bench configuration, for example,
Right.
or trace GC RSH configuration. It's just like, no, this is a different configuration. I can't use it.
Okay. I think this might be the points you guys may get some trouble in the future.
Yeah.
Like for example, if my understanding is right, like we already doing CSIA, we using ISOLink.
Yeah.
We should create the lab book which have exactly the same setting for ISOLink.
Yeah. So you make that. So you make that in the GC trace GC RSH. You make that lab book in that configuration.
Mm-hmm. And
Now-
then it's using today's configuration.
Yeah. Okay. Tuning configuration. So we'll say the tuning.
Uh-huh.
It would use the most current tuning.
Yes.
But the configuration is the instrument configuration, the physical,
Right.
what components are being used.
Mhm.
One thing that I've done it myself. It's a silly mistake, but sometimes you're thinking of other things. Is I'll come in, I'll do the on-offs in the conflow configuration, and then I'll try to run the trace GC, and I'm in the wrong configuration. It might just go.
Right.
So I always open, or I try to build a new labBook from scratch in the Conflow configuration for that, and it's like, oh, where's my auto sampler? Where's my trace GC method?
Right.
I'm in the wrong configuration. I need to go to the trace GC configuration to get all those components in the sample list.
So you said that it's also specific to the sample list. Does that mean that every time? Did you say that?
Yeah.
Like, do you have to create a new labBook every time you create a new sample list?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
One thing you can do for something like this, the easiest thing to do. Let's just go create. Let's just
I'm
open.
basically thinking practically, like in the morning, if I'm going to run a bunch of samples, do I need to create a new labBook every time?
Well, what you can do is it will not run if all the samples have been run. What you can do is add extra samples to the sample list.
Okay, so you
you
can
can't overwrite them. You cannot overwrite these.
Okay.
But what you can do is you can have more on the bottom. No, that's okay if you're just doing daily checks and stuff like that. You can actually put date in there. The other thing you can do is you can create a labBook.
So you maybe wouldn't recommend that for adding samples because it uses the tunings of the...
No, it'll use the latest tuning. It will always use the latest tuning.
Okay.
But what can happen especially is you could actually get a huge sample list, and it's like, oh,
Yeah.
where is it? Where is everything I need in this? So if you keep adding to the bottom of the sample list, it can get very cumbersome.
Okay.
So what I would do in that case is, if you know you're going to do the exact same analysis just on a different day, I would just put the date at the end of the analysis and then use the previous one as a template.
Okay.
And then it's just a case of then you populate the names.
So you would make a new labBook?
You make a new labBook.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be mine, because you can then keep it, it's granular and it just doesn't become this huge big. But you can then, but what I'm saying is making sure that you build the labBook from the correct configuration. What can happen sometimes, and it has happened to me, is I've had a trace GC RSH labBook that was created, and then I've had to change the trace GC configuration for whatever reason. I cannot use, because I've changed that configuration in the configurator. It might be the exactly the same components, but it might be, it might become corrupt at some point. I would have to create that labBook completely from scratch, because it sees it as a completely new configuration, and it won't accept it. It'll like, well, even though